Micro Shifts, Mega Results. The Science of Small Mental Wins, written by Ronnie Rowland, published by Growth Literacy Lounge. It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. Sir Edmund Hillary. We've been conditioned to believe that change has to be big to be meaningful. That transformation only happens through extreme makeovers, radical routines, or life-altering decisions. The truth? That approach rarely works. It's overwhelming, exhausting, and unsustainable. This is why so many people start strong but eventually give up, trapped in an endless cycle of trying and failing. But what if success isn't about making big moves at all? What if the real key to lasting change lies in the smallest shifts, the kind so subtle they seem almost insignificant at first? Science has proven that our brains thrive on progress, no matter how small. Every time we make a better choice, even the tiniest one, our brain releases dopamine, the chemical responsible for motivation and momentum. This is why checking off a single task feels satisfying, why taking one deep breath can calm stress, and why completing even a small workout can leave us energized. The problem isn't that we don't know how to change. The problem is that we ignore the small wins that make change effortless. This book isn't about massive transformations or unrealistic commitments. It's about understanding the science of micro shifts, small, strategic changes that, when repeated, create unstoppable momentum. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You just need to master the art of tiny, consistent improvements. Throughout these pages, we'll explore how small mental wins rewire your brain for success, how tiny actions compound over time, and how to break free from the mental resistance that keeps you stuck. You'll learn how to shift your mindset, reframe failure, and build habits that stick, not through force, but through smart, simple tweaks that fit seamlessly into your life. By the end of this book, you'll see change in a whole new way. You'll understand that success isn't about willpower or luck. It's about momentum. It's about progress. It's about stacking tiny wins until one day, without even realizing it, you've transformed completely. Big results don't come from big actions. They come from small shifts, repeated daily, and it all starts now. Chapter 1. Why Big Changes Fail and Small Shifts Win. We love dramatic transformations. The idea that we can wake up one day, decide to change everything, and suddenly become a new person is intoxicating. That's why New Year's resolutions, 30-day challenges, and 10x your life slogans are so appealing. We want results, and we want them fast. But let's be honest, how often does that approach actually work? Most of us have been there. We declare that this time will be different. We commit to waking up at 5 a.m., exercising daily, eating clean, and meditating. The first few days feel empowering, but then life happens. Work gets stressful, motivation dips, and before we know it, we're back to square one. The cycle repeats, leaving us frustrated and feeling like change is impossible. But here's the truth. It's not us that's broken, it's the approach. Big, sweeping changes fail because they rely on willpower, which is finite. Studies show that decision fatigue wears down even the most disciplined minds. When we attempt massive shifts, we exhaust our mental resources quickly. It's why crash diets fail, why people abandon new habits, and why motivation alone isn't enough. Our brains resist drastic changes, but they embrace small, manageable shifts. A Harvard Business School study, led by Teresa Amabile, found that the single biggest motivator isn't money or external rewards, it's progress. Even tiny wins create a sense of momentum. Each time we complete a micro shift, we get a dopamine boost, reinforcing the habit and making it easier to continue. Small steps don't trigger resistance the way big changes do. They feel effortless, which makes them sustainable. Consider this. If you improve by just 1% every day, you won't be 36% better by the end of the year. You'll be 38 times better. That's the magic of compounding. Tiny shifts accumulate in ways that radical overhauls never do. Success isn't about making one massive leap, it's about consistently moving forward, one small step at a time. A great example of this principle in action comes from British cycling. Before 2003, their team had been mediocre for over a century. They hired Dave Brailsford, who introduced a concept called marginal gains. Instead of attempting major changes, they focused on small, almost imperceptible improvements, adjusting seat positions by millimeters, refining nutrition, even changing pillowcases for better sleep. These micro shifts, insignificant on their own, added up to something extraordinary. Within 5 years, they dominated the sport, winning Olympic gold medals and Tour de France titles. The same principle applies to personal change. If we focus on making tiny, sustainable improvements, like drinking 1 extra glass of water, writing a single sentence in a journal, or swapping 5 minutes of screen time for meditation, those shifts become habits. Over time, they rewire our identity. We don't just act healthier or more productive, we become the kind of person who makes good choices naturally. So why do so many people still chase drastic change? Because small shifts don't feel dramatic. They lack the excitement of a total life overhaul. But here's the thing, transformation isn't supposed to be thrilling, it's supposed to be lasting. The people who succeed aren't the ones who make the biggest changes, they're the ones who make the smallest changes consistently. Right now, think of one tiny shift you can make, something so small it feels almost laughable. Maybe it's taking a deep breath before checking emails, reading 1 page of a book each night, or standing up for 30 seconds every hour. Whatever it is, start today. It won't feel like much at first, but over time, these micro wins will stack up in ways you never imagined. By the end of this book, you'll see just how powerful these tiny shifts can be. The next chapter will dive into the neuroscience behind small wins and why they work. But for now, remember this: success isn't about radical transformation. It's about progress. And progress starts with one small shift. Chapter 2. The neuroscience of small wins. Success isn't just about effort, it's about chemistry. Every time we accomplish something, no matter how small, our brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and reward. This chemical response is what keeps us moving forward. It's why checking off a task on a to-do list feels satisfying. It's why we feel good after completing a workout, even if it was short. Our brains are wired to seek more of what gives us that dopamine boost. The problem is that we often overlook small wins, waiting instead for big achievements to feel successful. But the science is clear. Reinforcing small wins creates long-term change. Stanford psychologist B.J. Fogg discovered that habits don't form because of motivation, they form because of tiny reinforcements. His research on behavior design revealed that when we celebrate small victories, like flossing a single tooth or doing 1 push-up, we train our brains to crave consistency. Over time, these micro-behaviors compound, leading to substantial lifestyle shifts. The key isn't in forcing massive change but in allowing small wins to accumulate naturally. Teresa Amabile's research at Harvard reinforces this. Her studies found that the most powerful motivator for sustained effort isn't external rewards but the perception of progress. When people feel like they're making even a little headway, they stay engaged. Conversely, when they don't recognize progress, they lose momentum. This is why so many people abandon their goals. They focus on how far they have to go instead of how far they've come. Shifting our perspective to acknowledge even the tiniest steps forward is crucial. Take professional athletes. They don't wake up one day and suddenly become champions. Their training is built on incremental progress, slightly improving their reaction time, adding a fraction of a second to their sprint, and refining their technique by 1% at a time. Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps didn't just train harder, he trained smarter, focusing on micro-adjustments that compounded into world records. If the best in the world rely on small wins, why wouldn't we? The same principle applies to mental resilience. Imagine 2 people facing a setback. One views it as proof of failure, while the other sees it as feedback for improvement. The first person's brain associates the experience with negativity, making them less likely to try again. The second person, however, experiences a small mental win by reframing the event. Over time, these mental shifts create a resilient mindset that turns challenges into opportunities. The key is in training the brain to recognize progress, no matter how small. Consider the concept of habit stacking. By attaching a small, positive action to an existing habit, we increase the likelihood of making it stick. For example, if we want to practice gratitude, we can link it to brushing our teeth by thinking of one thing we appreciate every time we brush. If we want to improve posture, we can take a deep breath before sitting down. These micro adjustments, when repeated daily, rewire our neural pathways, making positive behaviors automatic. This is also why negative habits form so easily. If we mindlessly scroll on our phones as soon as we wake up, our brains link waking up with distraction. If we check emails before breakfast, stress becomes part of our morning routine. But just as small negative habits shape us, small positive ones do too. The difference is that we have to be intentional about reinforcing the right patterns. So how do we use this knowledge? The answer is simple: start celebrating small wins. Instead of waiting for a big milestone, acknowledge minor victories. Finished a task. Take a moment to recognize it. Resisted a bad habit once? That's a win. Thought of a positive reframing instead of a negative thought? Another win. The more we recognize these moments, the more our brains seek to repeat them. By understanding how our brain works, we gain the power to shape our own success. Micro wins aren't just motivational gimmicks, they are the foundation of long-term change. In the next chapter, we'll explore how small shifts compound over time, leading to exponential results. But for now, focus on one thing: recognize your progress, however small. Your brain is listening, and every win counts. Chapter 3: The 1% Rule: How Tiny Changes Compound. Imagine improving just 1% every day. It seems insignificant, almost meaningless, but over time, that 1% compounds into exponential growth. This principle, known as the 1% Rule, is the foundation of sustainable success. Instead of chasing radical transformations, we focus on micro improvements. The math is simple: 1% better every day for a year doesn't make us 365% better, it makes us 3,800% better. Small shifts create massive results when given time to accumulate. British cycling provides a perfect example of this rule in action. Before 2003, they were unremarkable, no major wins, no standout athletes. Then came Dave Brailsford, who introduced the concept of marginal gains. Instead of demanding massive improvements, he focused on tiny optimizations. They adjusted bike seats by millimeters, improved hand-washing techniques to prevent illness, and optimized recovery strategies. Each change was small, but together they produced unprecedented success. Within 5 years, British cyclists dominated the sport, winning Olympic golds and Tour de France titles. This principle applies to every aspect of life. A writer who commits to writing just 50 words a day will have a book draft in a year. A person who exercises for 5 minutes daily builds a habit that expands over time. A leader who improves communication by 1% each day becomes exponentially more effective. The secret isn't in making one huge leap, it's in making small, consistent progress. The problem is that we often don't notice these small shifts. Because the changes feel minor, we assume they don't matter. This is why people abandon new habits. They expect instant results, and when progress isn't dramatic, they give up. But the impact of tiny improvements isn't visible immediately, it builds in the background. It's like filling a glass with a dripping faucet. For a long time it looks empty. Then, suddenly it overflows. This is how habits compound. Every small decision contributes to a larger trajectory. Eating one unhealthy meal won't ruin your health, just like eating one salad won't make you fit. But repeated over time, these choices create entirely different outcomes. Tiny shifts shape our identity. If we read one page of a book daily, we reinforce the identity of a reader. If we save a small amount of money consistently, we become financially disciplined. Identity follows action, and action begins with small steps. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, explains that success isn't about setting goals, it's about creating systems. Goals focus on outcomes, but systems focus on the process. A person who wants to run a marathon might set a goal, but without a system of daily training, that goal remains unattainable. The 1% rule ensures that we don't rely on motivation, which fluctuates, but on habits, which sustain progress. We can apply this principle to mental shifts as well. Imagine two people facing rejection. One sees it as failure, reinforcing self-doubt. The other views it as feedback, reinforcing resilience. Over time, these micro-interpretations shape how they see themselves and their capabilities. The first person avoids challenges, while the second embraces them. The difference isn't talent, it's mindset, shaped by repeated thought patterns. So, how do we implement the 1% rule? First, choose an area of life you want to improve. Then, identify the smallest possible action you can take. Make it so easy you can't fail. If you want to be more active, start with 1-minute stretches. If you want to read more, begin with a single paragraph. The goal is to make micro improvements feel effortless. Over time, these shifts expand naturally. The hardest part of change is starting, but when we focus on just 1%, starting feels manageable. We no longer wait for the perfect moment, we begin now. And with each tiny step forward, we reinforce the belief that we are improving. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to rewire negative thought patterns to ensure our small wins build momentum. But for now, remember this: small shifts, when compounded, lead to unstoppable growth. Chapter 4. Rewiring Negative Thought Patterns. Our thoughts shape our reality. Every belief we hold, every reaction we have, and every decision we make is influenced by the mental patterns we reinforce. The problem is that our brains are wired for negativity. This isn't our fault, it's biology. The human brain evolved to detect threats, prioritizing survival over happiness. This is why we remember criticism more than compliments, why failures stick with us longer than successes, and why we dwell on worst-case scenarios. But just as negative patterns form over time, they can also be rewired. Cognitive reframing is one of the most powerful tools for shifting thought patterns. This technique, rooted in neuroscience, helps us reinterpret negative experiences in a way that reduces their emotional impact. It's not about ignoring reality or pretending everything is perfect. Instead, it's about choosing a perspective that serves us rather than sabotages us. Consider a job rejection. One person might think, "I'll never be successful," reinforcing self-doubt. Another might think, "This wasn't the right opportunity," reinforcing resilience. Same event, different mindset. The difference isn't in what happened, it's in how it was framed. Neuroscience confirms that repeated thoughts create neural pathways, strengthening over time. Imagine carving a trail in the woods. The more you walk the same path, the clearer and easier it becomes. Negative thought patterns work the same way. The more we entertain them, the more automatic they become. But here's the good news: just as we create negative loops, we can build positive ones. Every time we reframe a thought, we weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. Over time, our default thinking patterns shift. One of the simplest ways to break a negative cycle is the 5-second rule, popularized by Mel Robbins. The moment we catch ourselves spiraling into negativity, we count backward from 5. This small interruption forces our brain to switch gears, making it easier to choose a new response. It sounds simple, but studies show that even brief interruptions in negative thinking can prevent stress and anxiety from escalating. Another powerful tool is the yet technique. Instead of saying, "I'm not good at this," we add the word yet. "I'm not good at this yet." This small shift transforms a fixed mindset into a growth mindset. It reminds us that ability isn't static, it's something we develop over time. Research by psychologist Carol Dweck shows that people who adopt a growth mindset are more resilient, more persistent, and more successful in the long run. Journaling can also be an effective way to rewire thought patterns. By writing down negative thoughts and then actively reframing them, we train our brains to adopt a more constructive perspective. For example, if we write, "I failed at this task," we can reframe it as, "I learned what doesn't work, which gets me closer to success." Over time, this practice becomes second nature, making it easier to challenge negative self-talk in real time. Consider Olympic athletes. They don't just train their bodies, they train their minds. Visualization is a core part of their preparation. By mentally rehearsing success, they build neural connections that make those outcomes more likely. The same principle applies to everyday life. If we visualize overcoming challenges, our brains become primed to handle them effectively. Breaking negative thought patterns isn't about eliminating all negativity. Challenges and setbacks are part of life. But by learning to reframe experiences, interrupt negative loops, and reinforce positive interpretations, we take control of our mindset. The key is consistency. Each time we catch and reframe a negative thought, we make it easier to do so again. This is how small mental shifts create lasting change. In the next chapter, we'll explore how daily rituals reinforce these mental shifts, making them automatic. But for now, start with one small action. Catch one negative thought today and reframe it. Over time, this simple practice will rewire your mind for resilience and growth. Chapter 5. The Power of Small Rituals. Our lives are shaped by what we do repeatedly. The small rituals we engage in every day determine our habits, our mindset, and ultimately our success. The problem is that most people think change requires massive effort, when in reality, it's the micro-rituals we perform consistently that define who we become. By deliberately designing tiny daily rituals, we can rewire our minds, build better habits, and create lasting transformation without relying on motivation. Rituals are different from habits. A habit is something we do automatically, like brushing our teeth. A ritual, however, is intentional. It's an act we perform with purpose, often linked to a specific emotional or mental shift. Drinking coffee in the morning can be a habit, but if it's paired with deep breathing and setting an intention for the day, it becomes a ritual that primes the mind for focus. These small shifts, though seemingly insignificant, shape how we think and behave. Morning rituals, for example, set the tone for the entire day. Studies show that the first hour after waking is the most influential on mindset and productivity. Those who start their mornings with intentional actions, such as journaling, stretching, or practicing gratitude, experience more clarity and resilience throughout the day. The key is starting small. Instead of trying to overhaul your entire morning routine, pick one micro ritual, like drinking a glass of water or taking one deep breath before looking at your phone. These minor adjustments create momentum. Evening rituals are just as important. The way we end our day impacts sleep quality and subconscious programming. If we spend the last hour of the day scrolling through social media, our brains absorb stress, comparison, and distraction. If instead, we engage in a calming ritual, like reading, reflecting on a small win, or practicing deep breathing, we train the brain to associate nighttime with relaxation and renewal. Over time, these micro-rituals improve sleep, mood, and overall well-being. The science behind rituals is simple. Every time we repeat an action, we reinforce neural pathways, making that behavior more automatic. This is why tiny rituals, even if they seem unimportant at first, compound into powerful habits. Olympic athletes, top performers, and successful entrepreneurs all rely on rituals to stay consistent. They don't leave success to chance, they design small, repeatable actions that set them up for peak performance. A famous example is Steve Jobs. He wore the same outfit every day, not because he lacked options, but because reducing decision fatigue allowed him to focus on higher priorities. This was a ritual that optimized his mental energy. Similarly, writers who sit in the same spot every day or musicians who warm up with a specific exercise aren't just practicing. They're signaling to their brains that it's time to perform. These cues make it easier to enter a state of flow. One of the most effective ways to implement rituals is through habit stacking, a method developed by B.J. Fogg. The idea is to attach a new micro-ritual to an existing habit. If you already brush your teeth, you can add a deep breath before and after. If you drink coffee daily, you can use the first sip as a cue to set an intention. These small pairings make it effortless to build new rituals without disrupting daily routines. The key to success with rituals is consistency, not intensity. A 5-second ritual done daily is more powerful than an hour-long practice done inconsistently. The goal isn't to make massive changes overnight, but to design micro-rituals that become second nature. Once these small shifts are ingrained, they serve as anchors that keep us on track, even when motivation fades. In the next chapter, we'll explore why celebrating small wins is crucial for maintaining motivation. But for now, start with one tiny ritual. Choose something simple, attach it to an existing habit, and commit to doing it daily. It may seem minor at first, but over time, these small rituals will rewire your brain for success. Chapter 6. Celebrating Tiny Wins. Success isn't just about progress, it's about recognizing progress. Most people focus so much on the end goal that they overlook the small wins happening every day. But science tells us that celebrating tiny victories is one of the most powerful ways to reinforce positive behaviors, build confidence, and create momentum. By shifting our focus from what we haven't accomplished yet to what we have, we make progress feel rewarding rather than exhausting. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, plays a key role in motivation. Every time we acknowledge a small win, our brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and making us want to repeat it. This is why checking something off a to-do list feels satisfying, even if it's a minor task. It's also why people who track their progress, whether in fitness, finances, or personal growth, tend to stay consistent. The act of noticing improvement keeps the brain engaged. A Harvard Business School study by Teresa Amabile found that small wins are the most powerful driver of motivation. She analyzed thousands of work diaries and discovered that employees who recognized small progress, even on difficult days, felt more engaged and productive. Conversely, those who ignored small wins felt stuck and demotivated, even if they were making significant progress. The lesson is clear: success isn't just about taking action, it's about recognizing the impact of those actions. The problem is that most people don't celebrate small wins because they seem insignificant. If they work out for 10 minutes, they dismiss it as not enough. If they write one page, they focus on how much more they need to do. This mindset kills momentum. Instead of reinforcing progress, it creates a sense of never being good enough. But when we shift our mindset to acknowledge every step forward, we make the process of improvement enjoyable. Consider the Seinfeld strategy, a simple method used by comedian Jerry Seinfeld. His goal was to write every day, even if just for a few minutes. To stay consistent, he used a calendar and marked an X for each day he wrote. Over time, his goal wasn't just writing, it was keeping the streak alive. This small act of recognition turned a simple habit into an unbreakable routine. The same strategy can be applied to anything: exercise, mindfulness, learning, or productivity. The key is tracking and celebrating consistency, not perfection. Another effective technique is the 2-minute rule. This rule states that if something takes less than 2 minutes to do, we should do it immediately. But beyond that, it also teaches us to celebrate small efforts. Reading one page of a book, doing one push-up, or writing a single sentence may seem minor, but they reinforce the identity we want to build. When we acknowledge these small steps, they naturally grow into larger habits. One way to implement this is through a micro-win journal. At the end of each day, write down one small victory, no matter how trivial it seems. Did you resist a negative thought? That's a win. Did you drink an extra glass of water? Another win. Over time, this simple practice rewires the brain to seek progress rather than perfection. The more we celebrate micro wins, the more motivated we become to continue making them. Celebrating small victories also changes how we handle setbacks. When progress feels rewarding, we are less likely to give up when things get tough. Instead of focusing on failures, we see the small wins within the challenge. This mindset shift keeps us moving forward, even when progress is slow. In the next chapter, we'll explore how small shifts in decision-making create massive long-term results. But for now, start by celebrating one micro-win today. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be acknowledged. Over time, these small moments of recognition will create the motivation and confidence needed for lasting success. Chapter 7. Micro shifts in decision-making. Every decision we make shapes our future. But most people assume that only big decisions matter: changing careers, moving to a new city, or making a major investment. In reality, it's the small, daily decisions that determine long-term success. Tiny choices, repeated over time, compound into massive outcomes. By mastering micro shifts in decision-making, we can create a future that aligns with our goals, without feeling overwhelmed by major life changes. Our brains are wired for efficiency. We make thousands of decisions every day, most of them unconsciously. What to eat, when to check our phones, whether to hit snooze. These choices seem insignificant in the moment, but they reinforce habits. If we want to improve any area of life, we don't need to make drastic decisions. We need to refine the small ones. The key is shifting from autopilot mode to intentional decision making, even in the smallest moments. The 5-second rule, developed by Mel Robbins, is one way to do this. It states that when we have an instinct to act on a goal, we must physically move within 5 seconds. Otherwise, our brain will kill the idea with doubt and hesitation. This works because action interrupts overthinking. Instead of debating whether to exercise, we count down from 5 and start moving. Instead of procrastinating on a task, we take one small action immediately. By reducing hesitation, we make better choices in real time. Another effective strategy is the 10-10-10 rule introduced by Susie Welch. When faced with a decision, ask, how will this choice affect me in 10 minutes? In 10 months? In 10 years? This method forces us to consider both short-term and long-term consequences. For example, skipping a workout feels good in the moment but doesn't align with long-term goals. Responding emotionally to a stressful email may feel justified but could harm relationships later. By applying this rule, we make choices that align with our future selves. Micro shifts in decision-making also apply to self-discipline. Most people believe discipline means resisting temptation through willpower. But willpower is limited. Instead, the best way to make better decisions is through environmental design. If we want to eat healthier, we place nutritious snacks within reach. If we want to read more, we leave a book on the nightstand instead of a phone. Small adjustments in our surroundings reduce the need for self-control, making good decisions effortless. Jeff Bezos uses a decision-making framework called the regret minimization model. He asks himself, in the future, will I regret not making this choice? This simple question eliminates fear-based hesitation. Most of our decisions are reversible, but we let overthinking stop us from taking action. By focusing on long-term impact rather than temporary discomfort, we make choices that align with growth instead of fear. Small decisions also shape mindset. Every time we choose to reframe a negative thought, we strengthen a new mental habit. If we respond to stress with a deep breath instead of frustration, we rewire our emotional responses. If we choose gratitude over complaint, we shift our perspective. Over time, these micro shifts reshape how we see the world. One practical way to improve daily decision-making is through decision batching. Instead of making choices throughout the day, we pre-decide certain actions. For example, setting a morning routine eliminates the need to decide how to start the day. Pre-planning meals removes the temptation to make impulsive food choices. Automating small decisions frees mental energy for more important ones. In the next chapter, we'll explore how managing mental energy leads to better focus and productivity. But for now, practice one micro shift in decision-making. It could be using the 5-second rule, applying the 10-10-10 framework, or designing an environment that supports better choices. Over time, these small shifts will transform the way you make decisions, leading to massive results. Chapter 8. The Science of Mental Energy Management. Energy, not time, is the true currency of productivity. We often believe that working longer hours, pushing harder, or squeezing more tasks into the day leads to success. But the truth is, without managing mental energy effectively, even the best strategies fail. The difference between high performers and those who struggle isn't intelligence or skill, it's how they allocate their mental energy. By making small shifts in energy management, we can improve focus, reduce stress, and maximize performance. The brain consumes about 20% of the body's total energy, making mental fatigue a real issue. Every decision, task, or bit of information we process drains cognitive resources. This is why we start the day feeling sharp but experience decision fatigue by afternoon. When energy is depleted, willpower weakens, focus declines, and productivity suffers. The solution isn't to push harder but to optimize energy flow throughout the day. One of the simplest ways to do this is through ultradian rhythms. Research shows that the brain naturally works in cycles of high focus for about 90 minutes, followed by 15 to 20 minutes of lower energy. Ignoring these cycles leads to burnout, but aligning with them boosts efficiency. This is why elite performers schedule deep work and focus blocks, followed by deliberate rest. Taking short breaks, whether a quick stretch, a deep breath, or stepping away from the screen, helps reset mental energy and sustain productivity. Another powerful strategy is the Pomodoro technique, which structures work into 25-minute sprints followed by 5-minute breaks. This method works because it prevents cognitive overload, keeping the brain fresh. Studies show that people who work in bursts of focused energy get more done than those who grind for hours without rest. The key is intentional recovery. Instead of checking emails or social media during breaks, activities like walking, listening to music, or deep breathing restore mental clarity. Managing energy also means protecting it from unnecessary drains. Multitasking, for example, is one of the biggest energy leaks. Contrary to popular belief, the brain doesn't truly multitask. It switches rapidly between tasks, creating mental exhaustion. Research shows that multitasking reduces productivity by up to 40% and increases mistakes. A better approach is task batching, grouping similar activities together to maintain cognitive flow. Decision fatigue is another energy drain. Every choice, no matter how small, depletes mental resources. This is why successful individuals simplify decisions. Mark Zuckerberg wears the same outfit daily, Steve Jobs did the same, and high performers often automate routine choices. Pre-planning meals, scheduling workouts, and setting daily priorities in advance reduce unnecessary decision-making, conserving mental energy for higher-impact tasks. Another factor affecting mental energy is the environment. Clutter, excessive notifications, and background noise create mental load, draining focus. Research from Princeton University found that a cluttered environment reduces the brain's ability to process information. By making small shifts, like decluttering a workspace, turning off notifications, or reducing background distractions, we free up energy for important tasks. Mindfulness practices also play a role. Studies show that even 1 minute of deep breathing or meditation can reset mental energy. Simple micro shifts, like pausing before reacting to stress or taking a few deep breaths before a meeting, improve focus and emotional regulation. These small habits, when repeated, build resilience against burnout. Sleep is another crucial element. Many people sacrifice sleep for productivity, but sleep deprivation reduces cognitive function, decision-making ability, and creativity. Even a small shift, like improving sleep quality by reducing screen exposure before bed or creating a wind-down ritual, makes a significant difference in energy levels. In the next chapter, we'll explore how overcoming resistance with micro shifts leads to sustained momentum. But for now, make one small adjustment to optimize your mental energy. Whether it's taking breaks, reducing multitasking, or improving your environment, every tiny shift compounds into greater productivity and focus over time. Chapter 9. Overcoming resistance with micro shifts. Resistance is the invisible force that keeps us stuck. It's the hesitation before starting a new habit, the excuse that postpones action, the internal battle between comfort and growth. Most people think resistance is a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign that change is happening. The key isn't to fight resistance with willpower, it's to outsmart it with small, strategic shifts. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with resistance is because they set the bar too high. When a goal feels overwhelming, the brain perceives it as a threat and triggers avoidance. This is why starting a workout feels harder than doing the workout itself, or why beginning a project is more difficult than completing it. The solution? Make the first step so small that resistance has no power over it. Instead of committing to an hour-long workout, commit to 5 minutes. Instead of writing a full report, start with 1 sentence. These micro shifts bypass the brain's fear response, making action feel effortless. The 2-minute rule, introduced by James Clear, is a powerful tool against resistance. It states that any habit should start with an action that takes less than 2 minutes. If the goal is to read more, the shift is reading 1 paragraph. If the goal is to meditate daily, it's closing the eyes for a few breaths. The magic of this method is that once an action begins, momentum takes over. The hardest part of any task is starting, but once we do, we're more likely to continue. Another strategy is the 5-minute commitment. When facing resistance, tell yourself you'll engage in the activity for just 5 minutes. This reduces pressure, making the task feel more manageable. Often 5 minutes turns into 10, then 20. The brain realizes the effort isn't as difficult as anticipated, dissolving the initial resistance. Procrastination is another form of resistance. People often delay tasks because they fear imperfection or discomfort. The best way to counteract this is through the principle of action before motivation. Most people wait to feel motivated before taking action, but research shows that action creates motivation, not the other way around. Small progress generates momentum, reinforcing the desire to keep going. Your environment can either work for you or against you. If there's friction between you and a habit, you're less likely to stick with it. Imagine wanting to work out, but your gym clothes are buried in a drawer. That tiny inconvenience? It's enough to make skipping exercise the easier choice. Small obstacles create big excuses. The solution? Make good habits effortless. Keep your workout gear visible, set your book where you'll see it, or prep healthy snacks in advance. When success is the easiest option, follow-through becomes automatic. The solution is to reduce friction. Lay out workout clothes the night before. Keep a book on the nightstand. Prepare healthy snacks in advance. By making positive actions easier and negative actions harder, we shape behavior effortlessly. Language also influences resistance. Saying I have to makes an action feel like an obligation, whereas saying I get to reframes it as an opportunity. The simple shift from I have to work out to I get to move my body changes the emotional response, making action feel rewarding rather than forced. The Zeigarnik effect, a psychological principle, explains why unfinished tasks create mental tension. When something is left incomplete, the brain holds onto it, creating pressure to finish. This is why starting, even in the smallest way, relieves resistance. Writing one sentence makes it easier to complete the paragraph. Taking one small action reduces the mental weight of an unfinished task. Resistance isn't a sign to stop, it's a sign to start small. The next time hesitation appears, shrink the task, reduce friction, or shift perspective. In the next chapter, we'll explore how environment shapes micro shifts and how small environmental tweaks can create effortless success. But for now, choose one action that feels overwhelming and shrink it down. The moment resistance loses its grip, momentum takes over, leading to effortless progress. Chapter 10. The role of environment in micro shifts. We like to believe that willpower drives success. That if we just try harder, we'll make better choices. But science tells us otherwise. The truth is, our environment influences our decisions more than motivation ever could. Small tweaks in our surroundings can make or break our habits, shape our mindset, and determine whether we follow through on our goals. The key to effortless change isn't fighting against our environment, it's designing it to work in our favor. A study by researchers at Cornell University found that people who kept fruit on their kitchen counter ate significantly more fruit than those who kept it stored away. The same principle applies to every habit. If something is visible and easy to access, we're more likely to engage with it. If it's hidden or inconvenient, we'll avoid it. This is why small environmental changes, placing a water bottle on your desk, leaving a book on your pillow, or setting out gym clothes the night before, dramatically increase the likelihood of taking action. The concept of choice architecture, popularized by behavioral economist Richard Thaler, explains how tiny shifts in environment influence behavior. Supermarkets place healthier foods at eye level, making them the default choice. Gyms design layouts to encourage movement by eliminating friction. Companies improve productivity by adjusting office lighting and temperature. The goal isn't to rely on willpower but to create an environment that nudges us toward the right decisions automatically. Reducing friction is another critical factor. If a habit requires too much effort, resistance builds. This is why people struggle to start new routines. The solution is to eliminate unnecessary steps. Want to read more? Keep a book within reach. Want to drink more water? Use a larger bottle. Want to exercise in the morning? Sleep in workout clothes. These micro-adjustments remove barriers, making good choices the path of least resistance. The same principle works in reverse. If we want to break a habit, increasing friction makes it easier to stop. If checking social media is a distraction, logging out after each use adds an extra step, reducing mindless scrolling. If late-night snacking is a problem, Storing unhealthy food in a hard-to-reach place decreases temptation. By making bad habits inconvenient and good habits effortless, change happens naturally. Clutter also impacts mental clarity. A study from Princeton University found that a cluttered environment overloads the brain, making it harder to focus. When too many objects compete for attention, decision fatigue sets in. This is why minimalism isn't just about aesthetics, it's about creating mental space. Even small acts like organizing a desk, clearing a workspace, or removing distractions improve focus and productivity. Lighting and sound play a role as well. Research shows that exposure to natural light boosts mood and cognitive function. Soft background music can enhance concentration, while excessive noise increases stress. Adjusting these factors, even in minor ways like working near a window or using noise-canceling headphones, shapes mental energy and efficiency. The people in our environment matter too. Social cues influence behavior more than we realize. If we're surrounded by individuals who prioritize health, learning, or personal growth, we naturally adopt those values. Conversely, if negativity, distraction, or complacency dominate our surroundings, those habits become our default. This is why choosing the right community is one of the most powerful environmental shifts we can make. Environment is the invisible force guiding our daily choices. By designing it intentionally, we eliminate the need for willpower. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to make micro shifts automatic, turning small behaviors into lasting habits. But for now, take one look at your environment. Identify one friction point, one distraction, or one opportunity for an upgrade. A tiny tweak today can create effortless success tomorrow. Chapter 11. How to make micro shifts automatic. The ultimate goal of any change is for it to become effortless. When something is automatic, it no longer requires discipline, motivation, or constant decision-making. It becomes part of who we are. This is why small, repeated actions are more powerful than bursts of intense effort. The secret to lasting transformation isn't in forcing change, it's in making micro shifts so ingrained that they happen without thinking. Habits are the brain's way of conserving energy. Instead of making every action a conscious decision, the brain creates shortcuts. This is why we brush our teeth without thinking, or why we instinctively reach for our phones when we're bored. The key to creating positive change is to hijack this process. By making small behaviors automatic, we eliminate the struggle and create effortless success. One of the most effective ways to do this is through habit stacking, a concept introduced by B.J. Fogg. The idea is simple: attach a new habit to an existing one. Since our brains already recognize patterns, linking a new behavior to an old one makes it stick faster. If you want to practice gratitude, pair it with brushing your teeth. If you want to stretch more, do it after pouring your morning coffee. These tiny pairings remove the need for motivation, making new behaviors part of a routine. Another strategy is using implementation intentions. Research shows that people who set a specific plan for when and where they'll complete an action are far more likely to follow through. Instead of saying, "I'll exercise more," set a clear cue. After I wake up, I will do 10 squats. When actions are tied to a trigger, they become predictable, reducing the mental effort required to complete them. Repetition is what solidifies micro shifts into lasting habits. A common misconception is that it takes 21 days to form a habit, but research from the University College London found that it actually varies. Some habits take a few weeks, while others take months. The key factor isn't time, it's consistency. The more often an action is repeated, the stronger the neural pathway becomes. One mistake people make is thinking they have to be perfect. But studies show that missing a habit once has no long-term effect, as long as we don't let it spiral into quitting. If we miss a day of journaling, exercising, or reading, it's not failure, it's just a pause. The important thing is to restart immediately, preventing the habit from fading. Another way to automate micro shifts is through environmental design. Placing a water bottle on the desk increases hydration. Leaving workout clothes visible makes exercise more likely. Keeping a book next to the bed encourages reading. These small adjustments eliminate the need for decision-making, making positive behaviors the default. Tracking progress also reinforces habits. The Seinfeld strategy, marking an X on a calendar for each day a habit is completed, creates a visual streak that strengthens motivation. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency. Seeing progress builds momentum, making it easier to keep going. Accountability adds another layer of reinforcement. Whether it's a friend, a coach, or an online group, having someone to check in with increases follow through. Even sharing progress publicly creates a psychological commitment that makes quitting less likely. By focusing on automation rather than effort, micro shifts become part of our identity. We stop forcing ourselves to do things and start doing them naturally. But for now, choose one micro shift and make it automatic. Whether it's attaching it to an existing habit, creating a clear trigger, or adjusting your environment, small changes today will create effortless success tomorrow. Take care and be well.